I spent 3 years of my life and $30,000 of my own hard-earned savings to put my fiancé through his dream degree. 3 years of grinding, of sacrificing, of believing with every fiber of my being that we were building a future together, brick by painstaking brick. I really believed that his dream was our dream, and that his success would be our success. But the moment he got that diploma, the moment he held that piece of paper that I had effectively paid for in cash, sweat, and lost time, he didn't just leave me. He orchestrated a brutal, public humiliation in front of everyone we knew, designed to utterly annihilate my spirit. He thought he had taken everything from me. He thought he had won, that he had successfully used me as a launchpad and could simply leave me behind on the ground. He was so wrong. He had no idea of the depths of my resolve, or the meticulous nature of my memory. The future I had funded? The future he had stolen? I could take it away just as easily. This is the story of how I systematically and completely destroyed the future he shattered mine to build. It all started, as these catastrophic stories so often do, with a feeling I was absolutely convinced was love. The real, epic, once-in-a-lifetime kind. I was 22 years old when I met Liam Peterson. He wasn't just handsome, he was intoxicating. He had a charm that was both effortless and laser-focused, an incredible, almost uncanny way of making you feel like you were the only person in the universe. That your words were the most fascinating thing he had ever heard. We fell for each other with a speed and intensity that felt like something out of a movie. Our first year together was a complete, intoxicating blur of late-night talks on the worn-out sofa in my tiny apartment, fueled by cheap takeout and even cheaper wine. We would talk for hours, mapping out our lives, dreaming about the future with the unshakable certainty of the young and in love. We were going to conquer the world, and we were going to do it together. Liam was, at the time, completely and miserably stuck in a dead-end logistics job he despised with a passion that was almost poetic. It was a soulless cycle of spreadsheets, shipping manifests, and a boss who seemed to delight in his own mediocrity. But that wasn't his dream. His real dream, the one that made his eyes light up and his voice drop with reverence, was to become a high-level software engineer. He talked about it constantly, his hands gesturing excitedly as he described the elegant, complex systems he wanted to build, the world-changing innovations he wanted to be a part of. He saw himself at a sleek, futuristic campus, solving problems that mattered. The only thing standing in his way was a massive, seemingly insurmountable wall. He didn't have the qualifications. The top-tier jobs he was aiming for, the ones with the six-figure salaries and the stock options, all required a specialized master's degree from a highly respected, top-tier university. A degree that came with a serious, terrifying price tag, $30,000. He brought it up one night, almost casually, but it was a carefully crafted casualness, a performance. He had that cloud of theatrical despair hanging over him as he scrolled through the university's program page on his laptop. He told me it was an impossible dream, a fantasy he needed to let go of, that he was destined to be stuck tracking shipping containers for the rest of his life. He laid out the obstacles with grim precision. He couldn't get a loan. His credit was shot from youthful mistakes, and his family, while loving, wasn't in any position to help him financially. He painted a picture of a man whose brilliant potential was being suffocated by circumstance. Seeing him so defeated, so utterly resigned to a life he hated, just broke my heart. It felt like a genuine tragedy. I was working as a junior project manager back then, my first real career track job, and I had been saving like a fiend since I got my first paycheck as a teenager. I had a nest egg, a substantial one for my age, money I had meticulously earmarked for a down payment on a house. The house I imagined us living in. Our house. So, I made a decision that, in hindsight, was the single most naive, most reckless, and most catastrophically misguided mistake of my entire life. I looked at him, at his beautiful, sad face illuminated by the glow of the screen, and I told him I'd pay for it, all of it. I was 24 at the time, still young enough to believe that love could conquer all practicalities. I actually proposed that we look at this as a strategic investment in our collective future. I used my project manager vocabulary, framing it like we were a startup and this was our seed funding. We were a team. I would be the initial investor, handling the capital for his education, and once he graduated and landed one of those six-figure tech jobs he dreamed of, he would take over as the primary earner. He would become the financial powerhouse. Then, I reasoned I could maybe go back to school myself, or we could finally buy that perfect little home with the big backyard we were always talking about. It all made perfect sense in my head. It was a spreadsheet with a happy ending. His reaction was everything I had hoped for. He was ecstatic, completely overcome. He literally cried, burying his face in my shoulder. Great! Gulping sobs of relief. He held me so tightly I could barely breathe. He told me I was his angel, his savior, the one person who truly believed in him. He promised me the world, a future so bright I'd need sunglasses. He swore, with a sincerity that seemed utterly unimpeachable, that once he was established, he would repay me tenfold not just in money, he clarified, but in a life of security and ease, a life I could only dream of. He would make sure I never had to worry about anything ever again. And I believed him. I drank it all in. I believed every single, solitary word. So, we put the plan into furious motion. I went to my bank the next day and liquidated a huge, terrifying chunk of my savings to pay the first tuition installment. The number on the transfer confirmation made my stomach clench, but I pushed the fear down, replacing it with a giddy sense of purpose. To cover the rest of the tuition, plus our living expenses which were now entirely my responsibility, I took on a second job waitressing at a bustling Italian restaurant on weekends. My life became a grueling, relentless cycle, my 9-to-5 office job where I managed timelines and budgets, then a quick bus ride to the restaurant to be on my feet, smiling and serving until well past midnight, then collapsing into bed just to wake up and do it all over again. The exhaustion was bone deep. I sold my car, a little blue hatchback I absolutely adored, the first major purchase I had ever made for myself. I told myself it was a necessary sacrifice, freeing up cash and saving on insurance. I started taking the bus everywhere, which added hours of travel time to my already impossible schedule. My social life simply evaporated. Friends' birthdays, after-work drinks, weekend trips, they all became luxuries I couldn't afford in either time or money. Every spare dollar, every ounce of my dwindling energy, was funneled directly into Project Liam. Liam, to his credit, seemed dedicated to the academic part of the bargain. He was enrolled in a demanding, intensive one-year program, and he appeared to be taking it seriously. He studied hard, his desk perpetually buried under a mountain of textbooks and printouts. He was always at the university library, always working on complex coding projects. I'd bring him coffee and sandwiches during his late-night study sessions, my heart swelling with this profound sense of pride. I was his support system, the silent partner in his success. I was helping him achieve his dream. We were a team. We were building our empire. Looking back, the red flags were there. They weren't giant, waving banners of warning. They were small, subtle, insidious little things. At first, they were easy to dismiss. He became more distant, more preoccupied, and when I gently tried to connect, to ask if everything was okay, he'd just blame it on the immense stress of his coursework. "You can't imagine how intense this is, babe," he'd say, a new note of condescension in his voice. When I'd try to talk about our future, about the specifics of our plans for after he graduated, he'd get vague and evasive. "Let's just get through this first, babe," he'd say, patting my hand dismissively. "One mountain at a time." He started spending more and more time with his new university friends, a cohort of people I never, ever met. He'd go to study groups that stretched late into the night, often not coming home until the early hours of the morning. If I asked about the people in his group, he'd get defensive and prickly, making me feel like I was being clingy or insecure. "They're just my classmates, Sarah. We're talking about object-oriented design. You wouldn't get it." He slowly, skillfully built this narrative where his new world was this complex, high-intellect place that I, the simple project manager and waitress, just couldn't possibly understand or be a part of. The financial strain on me was immense, far beyond what I had even anticipated. It was so much more than just the tuition. It was the endless stream of additional costs. The ridiculously expensive textbooks, the specialized software he needed for his classes, the brand new, top-of-the-line laptop he insisted he had to have for his programming assignments. On top of that, it was me paying the rent, the utilities, the groceries, all of it, completely on my own. My bank account, once a source of pride and security, was now a source of constant, gut-wrenching anxiety. Financial betrayal is often about more than just money. It's a slow, creeping erosion of trust that can feel as devastating and as intimate as any other kind of infidelity. I was practically living on instant noodles and cheap bread so that he could have the best of everything, so that he could focus without any distractions. I felt this constant, low-level hum of anxiety, a tight knot of stress in my stomach that never went away. But whenever a flicker of doubt or resentment crept in, I'd just picture his graduation day. I would conjure the image in my mind, the two of us, side by side, triumphant, him turning to me with gratitude in his eyes. It would all be worth it then, I told myself. It was my mantra. He had promised me his graduation party would be a celebration for ****. That was the one future plan he was always happy to talk about in detail. He said he would get up in front of everyone, our friends, our families, and tell them the whole story. He would tell them that he couldn't have done any of it without me, that I was the reason he was standing there. He was going to officially announce our engagement and tell everyone that I was the true foundation of his success. That promise was the fuel that kept me going through the longest, most physically and emotionally exhausting year of my entire life. I clung to that image like a life raft in a stormy sea. Little did I know, he wasn't just planning a celebration. He was meticulously planning my ultimate public humiliation. The day of his graduation was, with a brutal sense of irony, absolutely beautiful. The sun was shining with a warm, optimistic brilliance out of a perfect, cloudless blue sky. I sat in the audience at the cavernous university auditorium, my heart swelling with so much pride it felt like it would literally burst out of my chest. I had bought a new dress for the occasion, a simple but elegant blue dress, one of the first things I'd bought for myself in over a year. It felt like a symbol of the new life that was about to begin. When they finally called his name, Liam Peterson, Master of Science in Software Engineering, with distinction, I shot to my feet, clapping so hard my hands went red and numb, hot tears of joy and relief just streaming down my face. I didn't care who saw. He walked across that stage, a confident stride I had helped to build, shook the dean's hand, and held up that diploma. **** diploma. That's what it felt like to me. In my mind, both of our names were on it. We had done it. The party was scheduled for later, that evening at a trendy exclusive rooftop bar he had insisted on. It was painfully expensive, a place with minimalist decor and artisanal cocktails that cost a week's worth of my grocery budget. It was way more than I would have chosen, but he said it was a crucial networking opportunity and that his new friends and colleagues were used to a certain standard. I swallowed my concerns and paid the substantial deposit for the venue out of my waitressing tips, money that I had to practically beg my manager to cash out for me in advance. When I arrived, the place was already packed, buzzing with a loud, confident energy. It was just a sea of unfamiliar, sophisticated faces, his classmates, his professors, people he introduced with a flourish as future colleagues. My friends and my family were there too, but they were all huddled together near the entrance, looking like a small, lost island of suburbs in this vast, glittering ocean of Liam's new life. I felt a strange, chilling sense of being an outsider at what was supposed to be my own party, our victory celebration. Liam was in his element, holding court in the center of the crowd. A glass of expensive champagne was in his hand, and he looked every bit the successful, brilliant man I had poured my entire life savings and my very soul into creating. He floated effortlessly from group to group, laughing a new, booming laugh, shaking hands, clapping men on the back. He kissed me when I walked in, but it was a quick, dismissive peck on the cheek, his eyes already scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. He immediately turned his attention right back to some older, distinguished-looking man he introduced as a senior vice president at a major tech firm. I just stood there, holding my clutch, feeling like an awkward +1. About an hour into the party, just as my anxiety was reaching a fever pitch, he moved to the center of the terrace and tapped a champagne flute with a spoon for attention. The chatter immediately died down. This was it. The moment he had promised me, the moment I had replayed in my head 1,000 times during 1,000 exhausting shifts. My heart was pounding in my chest, a frantic drumbeat of anticipation. He stood in the center of the room, a confident, easy smile playing on his lips, the city lights twinkling behind him like a movie backdrop. "I just want to thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his voice smooth and strong. "This is a huge moment for me, a truly defining moment. This degree is the key to the rest of my life. It's the culmination of so much hard work, so many sleepless nights." He paused for dramatic effect, and his eyes swept the room. They met mine for a fleeting, almost imperceptible second, and I smiled, a huge, tremulous smile, my eyes welling up with happy tears all over again. This was it. But then his gaze moved on, gliding right past me and landing on a woman standing near the bar. She was absolutely stunning, in a way that seemed both effortless and astronomically expensive. She was dressed in a sharp, architectural designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary. I had never, ever seen her before in my life. Liam's smile widened into a full-blown, radiant beam. And I have to say, I couldn't have gotten through this last year without the support of someone truly special. Someone who understands my ambition, who challenges me intellectually, and who I absolutely cannot wait to start my new life with. My smile froze on my face. My blood ran cold, a sudden, icy shock that started in my scalp and shot down my spine. The words were right, but the context was all wrong. This wasn't the speech he'd promised. This wasn't right. My brain couldn't process it. "So," he continued, his voice booming with triumphant joy across the now completely silent room, "I'd like to introduce you all to Cassandra." He gestured with a grand, sweeping motion towards the woman in the designer dress, "My fiancé." The word just hung in the air, a poison dart aimed directly at my heart. It exploded in the silence. Cassandra beamed, a picture of perfect happiness, and held up her left hand, where a massive, multi-carat diamond ring sparkled with blinding intensity under the bar lights. A collective, horrified gasp rippled through the small part of the room where my family and friends stood. I saw my mother's face, a mask of pure shock and incandescent horror. My father's hand clenched into a fist at his side. But he wasn't done. Oh no, he wasn't nearly done. The final act of cruelty was yet to come. He then turned his attention back to me, a look of sickening pity, of condescending, performative magnanimity on his handsome face. "And of course," he said, his voice dripping with this fake, syrupy sincerity that was more insulting than any curse word, "I have to give a very special shout out to my dear friend, my biggest supporter, a truly, truly generous soul, Sarah." He pointed directly at me. Every single head in the room, hundreds of them, swiveled in my direction. I was pinned by their stares. "Sarah, your financial support was invaluable," he continued, letting the word hang in the air. "You were like my own personal scholarship fund. And for that, I will be forever grateful." A ripple of laughter trickled through his group of new, slick friends. It wasn't loud, riotous laughter. It was worse. It was a collection of stifled snickers, contemptuous smirks, and raised eyebrows. To me, it was a deafening roar of mockery that burned my ears. He hadn't just dumped me. He hadn't just announced his engagement to another woman in front of my family. He had reduced my love, my sacrifice, my two jobs, my sold car, my entire year of grueling, soul-crushing work, to a pathetic, transactional joke. He framed me as a charity case, A simple-minded benefactor he was now magnanimously thanking from his new, lofty pedestal. The public nature of it, the cold calculation, was designed to inflict maximum damage, to twist the knife, and to leave me with no doubt about my new place in his life, a footnote. A stepping stone he was now gleefully wiping his new, expensive shoes on. The emotional distress was overwhelming, a tidal wave of white-hot anger, sickening betrayal, and a profound, bottomless sadness that felt like it was going to swallow me whole. I just stood there, frozen in the spotlight of my own humiliation. My face was burning, my ears were ringing. I could feel 100 pairs of eyes on me, a disgusting mixture of pity, morbid curiosity, and secondhand embarrassment. I saw my dad take an aggressive step towards Liam, his face like thunder, but my mom put a restraining hand on his arm, holding him back. Liam and Cassandra just stood there, smiling, accepting congratulations and hugs from their friends. They didn't even look at me again. I was dismissed. My role in the play was over. I had been written out of the story. I honestly don't remember the physical act of getting out of there. The memory is a blur of motion and sound. I think my brother, Mark, guided me out, his arm wrapped tightly and protectively around my shoulders, his body a shield against the stairs. I just remember the cold night air hitting my face like a slap, and the nauseating, dizzying feeling of the entire world tilting violently on its axis. The entire future I had invested everything in, emotionally, physically, and financially, had just been detonated in front of every single person I knew and loved. The trust wasn't just broken, it was atomized into a million irreparable pieces. He hadn't just committed financial infidelity, he had weaponized it to execute a public social assassination, and he had clearly enjoyed it. The days that followed the party were a black hole of despair. I didn't get out of bed. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I called out of both of my jobs, leaving vague messages about a family emergency, which felt like the truest thing I could say. The humiliation was a physical weight, a crushing pressure on my chest that made it hard to breathe. It was a constant, replaying movie in my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I just saw his smug, triumphant face and Cassandra's impossibly sparkling ring. I heard the chorus of snickers from his friends. It felt like a form of post-traumatic stress. The betrayal triggered a complete and total crisis of my own self-worth. How could I have been so stupid, so blind? How could I have let myself be used so completely and callously? The questions looped endlessly. A soundtrack of self-recrimination. For about a week, I was just drowning in that thick, suffocating despair. My family was incandescent with fury. My friends were amazing, wrapping me in a cocoon of support, bringing soup I wouldn't eat and offering words of comfort I couldn't hear. But I felt utterly and completely alone in my personal hell. They wanted me to be angry, to scream and cry and throw things. And I was angry, of course, but it was a different kind of anger. It was a cold, quiet, heavy anger that was slowly solidifying in the pit of my stomach. The deep, overwhelming sadness was beginning to crystallize into something else, something harder, something much, much sharper. It was a burgeoning desire not just for some abstract concept of justice, but for tangible, proportional restitution. He had built his glorious new future on the scaffolding of my life. And I was not going to let him just walk away and enjoy the view. The turning point came during one long, sleepless night, around 3 a.m. The hour of ghosts and bad decisions. I was scrolling aimlessly through social media on my phone, a form of digital self-harm, torturing myself by looking at his profile. It was already updated, of course, scrubbed clean of my existence. His relationship status was proudly displayed, in a relationship with Cassandra DeWitt. And there it was, his new job title, posted for the world to see and admire, junior software architect at Cybercorp Innovations. He had even posted a picture of himself signing his employment contract at a massive mahogany desk, a huge, triumphant, "I've made it" grin plastered on his face. Cybercorp. The name echoed in my mind. I knew that name. It was one of the top tech firms in the country, a titan of the industry, notoriously difficult to get into. They were also famous for their obsession with their public image, their stringent corporate ethics policies, and the incredibly high value they placed on personal and professional integrity. And that's when an idea, a dark, intricate, and beautiful seed, began to sprout in the barren soil of my mind. He thought the transaction was complete. I had paid my part, he had received his prize, and he had moved on. But in his arrogance, he had forgotten one crucial, fatal detail. The very foundation of his entire new life, that $30,000 degree, was built on a lie. Not just a moral lie between the two of us, but a potential lie he had told to the university. A lie that is, in fact, illegal. My revenge wouldn't be emotional or messy. There would be no dramatic confrontations, no screaming matches, no slashed tires. It would be cold, professional, and absolute. It would be a corporate demolition. I was a project manager, after all. I dealt in timelines, evidence, and execution. And this was going to be my new Project Takedown. The first thing I did the next morning was transform my grief into action. I began to dig into the financials. I had kept meticulous records of everything. A habit from my job that now felt like a godsend. I had years of bank statements showing the large lump sum tuition transfers directly from my personal savings account to the university's bursars' office. I had folders of credit card statements with receipts for his textbooks and specialized software, all paid for with my card. I found the bill of sale for my little blue car and the corresponding bank statements showing my weekend waitressing income. A clear and separate stream of cash I had generated solely for this purpose. I laid it all out on my living room floor, a literal paper trail of my sacrifice, a financial diary of my exploitation. Then, I focused my search on a specific term, FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. I remembered him filling it out at our kitchen table. He told me at the time that he probably wouldn't get much, given the cost of the program, but that every little bit helped and it was worth a shot. I had a sick, creeping feeling in my stomach. What exactly had he put on that form? A little forensic digging through my old emails, searching for keywords like FAFSA, student aid, and university financial, yielded pure, unadulterated gold. He had forwarded me a confirmation email from the Department of Education a year ago, with the casual subject line FYI. Attached was a PDF copy of his student aid report SAR. My hands were literally shaking as I downloaded and opened the file. And there it was, in the cold, bureaucratic black and white of a government form. He had claimed to be a fully independent student with a declared income that matched only his old, part-time logistics job. He had listed his assets as practically zero. Nowhere on the form, in any of the sections asking about financial support from others, did he declare the substantial, ongoing, life-sustaining financial support he was receiving from me. He didn't list the $30,000 as a gift, an asset, or any kind of untaxed income or support. He had effectively hidden my existence and my contribution from the federal government and the university's own financial aid office. Because of this deception, he had likely received need-based institutional grants and smaller university scholarships that were reserved for genuinely needy students. And lying on FAFSA isn't just frowned upon. It's a federal offense. It's fraud. And universities, who receive federal funding, are legally required to investigate and report suspected fraud when it's brought to their attention. My next step was to fully understand the professional consequences. I spent hours online, diving into a rabbit hole of academic policy and corporate law. I researched phrases like professional misconduct, resume fraud, lying on application, and degree revocation. My project manager brain was in full gear. I learned that many universities have stringent honor codes that cover not just academic cheating, but also fraudulent representation in admissions or financial aid applications. Committing fraud to obtain the financial means to get a degree could be, and often was, grounds for having that degree rescinded. And major corporations like Cybercorp almost universally have ethics clauses in their employment contracts, being hired based on fraudulent credentials like a degree that was obtained through fraud would be a clear and flagrant violation a fireable offense. With my research complete, I began to draft 2 packages of evidence. Each one was a meticulously organized, professional-grade portfolio. This was my project plan. The first was for the university. It included 1. A calm, professional, and dispassionate cover letter. I introduced myself as Liam's former fiancé and primary financial benefactor during his time in the program. I stated, very clearly and without emotion, that I had recently discovered evidence suggesting his application for financial aid contained significant material misrepresentations and omissions. 2. Clean copies of my bank statements, with the 3 large tuition payments highlighted in yellow. 3. Copies of my credit card statements, with the purchases of his required textbooks and software clearly circled in red. 4. A notarized affidavit, which I had professionally drafted. In it, I detailed our living arrangement and the full extent of my financial support, including covering 100% of his rent, utilities, and all living expenses for the duration of his studies. I explained that this support was provided under the verbal agreement that we were building a future together. 5. A printed copy of his student aid report that I had found in my email, showing the income and assets he had declared as stark, an undeniable contrast to the reality of the support he was actually receiving. 6. Finally, in a moment of inspiration, I included printouts from his own public social media profile, showing his posts about the graduation party, including his now infamous shout-out to me as his personal scholarship fund. This, I noted, inadvertently served as a public admission of the very financial relationship he had criminally hidden from the authorities. The second package was for Cybercorp. It was similar in content, but tailored for a corporate, risk-averse audience. 1. A cover letter addressed directly to the head of human resources and the chief ethics and compliance officer. I spent an hour on LinkedIn and the company website to find their exact names and titles. The letter was concise and professional. I stated that I was writing to provide information suggesting that a recent hire, Mr. Liam Peterson, may have secured his academic qualifications, and by extension his employment at their esteemed firm, through fraudulent means. 2. It contained the same damning financial evidence and my notarized affidavit. 3. Crucially, I added a section titled Potential Reputational and Compliance Risk. I highlighted Cybercorp's own publicly stated commitment to integrity, honesty, and ethics, quoting directly from their corporate responsibility page. I subtly but clearly pointed out the significant risk of employing an individual who had demonstrated a clear willingness to commit federal fraud for personal gain. This type of professional misconduct, I noted, can be grounds for immediate dismissal for cause. I wasn't just presenting a jilted lover's tear-stained complaint. I was presenting a well-documented, evidence-based case of fraud. I was speaking their language, the language of liability, compliance, risk management, and institutional integrity. The universities themselves can be held liable and fined for not preventing financial aid fraud, which makes them much more likely to act decisively when a case is presented to them so clearly and comprehensively. Before I sent anything, I did one last thing to ensure my plan was foolproof. I booked a 1-hour consultation with a lawyer who specialized in civil litigation. I didn't want this to somehow boomerang and backfire on me. I laid out the entire story, from the happy beginning to the humiliating end, and showed her the 2 evidence packages I had assembled. I made it crystal clear that I wasn't suing him. I knew getting the money back would be a nearly impossible uphill battle without a written contract. This wasn't about recouping the money. This was about principle and consequences. The lawyer listened intently, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she looked at the folders, then back at me. She confirmed my thinking. She told me that reporting suspected fraud to the relevant institutions was not only perfectly legal, but in some ways a civic duty. Since I was providing factual, documented evidence and not making baseless accusations, it could not be considered libel, slander, or harassment. She helped me refine the wording of my cover letters to be as neutral, objective, and fact-based as possible, stripping out any remaining hint of emotion or personal grievance. She called it a whistleblower report, and the term felt perfect. It validated my entire approach. That night, holding the two thick, heavy envelopes in my hands, I felt a sense of profound calm I hadn't felt since before that horrible party. The storm inside me had quieted. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a calculated, strategic, and necessary response to a calculated, strategic, and soul-crushing betrayal. He had treated my love and my sacrifice like a line of credit on a business plan. So, I was going to give him a business outcome he could understand: total liquidation. The next morning, I walked to the post office. The air was crisp and cool, a perfect autumn day. I felt serene. I paid for tracked, priority, signature-required shipping for both envelopes. One was addressed to the office of the Dean of Student Affairs and the Director of Financial Aid at his prestigious university. The other was addressed to the Head of Human Resources and the Chief Ethics Officer at Cybercorp's gleaming corporate headquarters. As I slid the thick packages into the mail slot, I felt the heavy, metallic clink as they dropped inside. I didn't feel rage or sadness or even satisfaction. I felt a quiet, resolute sense of power. The kind of power he had tried so cruelly and so publicly to strip from me. I had armed the torpedoes. I had launched them. Now, all I had to do was wait for the sound of the impact. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a new email. My heart leaped into my throat. It was from a senior administrator in the Dean of Student Affairs office. It was brief, formal, and chillingly efficient. Ms. Miller, thank you for bringing this matter to our attention. We take allegations of this nature with the utmost seriousness. The university will be conducting a full and thorough investigation into the information and documentation you have provided. The first torpedo had hit its target. The institutional machinery was now in motion. I knew from my research that universities have entire departments and established formal processes for this exact situation. As financial aid fraud is a significant and ongoing problem for them, my detailed package had made it impossible for them to ignore. The real explosion came a week later. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was at my desk at work, trying to focus on a project plan, when my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but a jolt of intuition, of primal curiosity, got the better of me. I stepped into the hallway. Sarah. The voice on the other end was strained, choked with a panic so thick it was barely recognizable. It was Liam. "Hello, Liam," I said. My voice was as calm and even as a frozen lake. "What did you do?" he hissed, the words spitting out of him. All the suave charm was gone from his voice, replaced by raw, panicked, cornered animal fury. "What the hell did you do?" "I'm not sure what you mean, Liam," I replied, and I allowed myself to savor the moment just a little. The sound of his panic was the sweetest music I had ever heard. "Don't you dare play dumb with me." I was just called into a meeting with HR and their head of legal. They had bank statements. Your bank statements. They have receipts for my books. They had a letter from you. They put me on administrative leave. Leave. Sarah. They're talking about fraud. They're talking about terminating my contract for ethical violations. I stayed silent, letting him completely unravel, letting the weight of his actions crush him. "And the university," he shouted, his voice cracking now, tipping over into hysteria. "The university called me this morning. They're opening a formal inquiry into my student file. They're talking about rescinding my degree. They said if I committed financial aid fraud, the degree is void. Do you know what that means? It means everything is gone. My job, my degree, everything." "Yes, Liam," I said softly, my voice dropping to a whisper that was colder than his shout. "I know exactly what it means. It means the future that I paid for is being repossessed for non-payment." There was a moment of complete, stunned silence on the other end of the line. Just the sound of his ragged breathing. I think in that single instant, he finally, truly understood. He finally saw me not as the meek, supportive, disposable doormat he had discarded, but as the meticulous and unforgiving architect of his ruin. "Why?" he whispered, all the anger suddenly draining out of him, replaced by a pathetic, pleading, desperate tone. "It was over. I moved on. Why couldn't you just let it go?" "You're right. It was over," I said, and for the first time, I let the pure, unadulterated ice in my voice show. "It was over the moment you stood up at that party, in front of my family and friends, and called me your personal scholarship fund. You made our entire relationship, my love, my sacrifice, my do jobs, into a dirty little financial secret you could use to get ahead and then laugh about. You didn't just dump me, Liam. You tried to humiliate me out of existence. You thought I was just a line item on your budget that you could close out. You were wrong. This isn't about the money, Liam. It never was. It's about the fact that you build your brilliant new life on a foundation of lies. And lies, well, they have a way of collapsing the whole structure." He started to sputter, to make excuses, to desperately try to shift blame, to blame me for being vindictive, to blame Cassandra for being demanding, to blame the system, to blame everyone and everything but himself. I didn't listen. I didn't need to. "Goodbye, Liam," I said calmly, and I hung up the phone. I immediately blocked his number, his email, and all of his social media profiles. The demolition was in progress, and the outcome, I knew with absolute certainty, was inevitable. The fallout was swift, total, and catastrophic for him. A mutual friend, one of the few who had firmly and immediately sided with me after the party, kept me updated on the grim details, which I received with a quiet sense of finality. Liam was officially fired from Cybercorp 2 weeks after he was put on leave. The corporate world, it turns out, can move with brutal and impersonal efficiency when its reputation and compliance are on the line. Their internal ethics department concluded, not surprisingly, that he had secured his employment under false pretenses by presenting an academic credential that was under active investigation for fraud. His brilliant career in high-level tech, the one I had funded with my own blood, sweat, and tears, was over before it even began. Of finding a professional misconduct and dismissal for cause like this would be a permanent, toxic black mark on his professional record. The university's investigation, being an academic institution, took longer, as I expected it would. They were thorough, but their conclusion was the same. About 4 months later, I received another formal, cream-colored envelope in the mail with the university's crest on it. It was a letter informing me, as the reporting party, that their investigation had concluded, and that the Academic Senate had voted to approve the recommendation of the inquiry committee. Liam Peterson's Master of Science degree had been officially and permanently rescinded due to gross misrepresentation and material fraud in the financial aid application process. That piece of paper he had so proudly held up on stage, the symbol of his betrayal, was now completely and utterly worthless. His life, as he knew it, imploded. Cassandra, the glamorous, high society fiancé, apparently hadn't signed up for a future with an unemployed man with no degree, no job prospects, and a permanent reputation for fraud. She left him within a month of him being fired from Cybercorp. The big, sparkling diamond ring disappeared right along with her. He was forced to move out of his expensive new apartment in the city and back in with his parents, into his childhood bedroom. The last I heard, through the grapevine, was that he was back at a logistics company, doing a job remarkably similar to the one he had before all this started, only now he was saddled with the deep corrosive shame and the constant, haunting knowledge of what he had built and then so arrogantly thrown away. He had tried to get ahead by taking a shortcut built on the foundation of my life. And he ended up right back where he started, only so much further behind. Buried under the rubble of his own making. Did I feel guilty? No, not for a moment. Do I regret it? Not for a single second. I know what people say, that revenge doesn't lead to happiness, that forgiveness and healing is what truly matters. But for me, this act of calculated justice was the first and most crucial step to healing. It wasn't about inflicting pain for the sake of it. It was about rebalancing the scales of justice that had been so violently tipped. It was about taking back the power and the dignity he had so cruelly and so publicly stripped from me. He made a cold, calculated decision to use and humiliate me for his own gain, and I made a cold, calculated decision to hold him accountable for his actions. It felt like the only logical, symmetrical response. The satisfaction wasn't a hot, fiery, fleeting feeling. It was a cool, quiet, and lasting sense of peace. The knot of anxiety that had lived in my stomach for over a year finally, blessedly, and knotted itself. The ghosts of his condescending laughter and my public humiliation finally faded into silence. I had closed the project. The final report was written, the stakeholders were informed, and the outcome was successful. It's been 2 years since I walked to that post office and mailed those letters. My life today looks nothing like the one I had once so carefully planned with Liam. And for that, I am profoundly, deeply, and eternally grateful. I quit the waitressing job the day after I hung up the phone with him, walking in before my shift and telling my manager I was moving on to bigger and better things. I focused all my energy on my real career as a project manager, and I've been promoted twice since then. Turns out I'm exceptionally good at what I do. I take complex, broken, and chaotic systems and I fix them. I suppose, in the end, that's exactly what I did with the mess he made of my life. I never got the $30,000 back, not in cash. I accepted early on that the money was gone forever. But I got something far more valuable in return. I got my self-respect back. I got my sense of security back. I learned the incredibly high price of investing in someone who isn't truly invested in you. I learned that my own dreams are worth funding. My own future is worth protecting. I learned that financial betrayal is a profound breach of trust, and that protecting yourself from it isn't selfish. It's absolutely necessary. I eventually started dating again, cautiously and wisely at first. I'm now with a man who is my partner in the truest sense of the word. We are building our future together, brick by brick. With total transparency, unwavering honesty, and mutual respect, there are no secrets. Financial or otherwise, our finances are an open book because our hearts are too. Sometimes I wonder what Liam thinks about now, in the quiet moments. If he ever truly understands the real reason his life fell apart. It wasn't because I was a vengeful ex-girlfriend. It was because he was fundamentally dishonest. He was a con man who thought his charm was a superpower. He thought he could build a skyscraper on a rotten, crumbling foundation. I didn't push it over. I just gave it a little nudge, and it collapsed under the weight of its own lies. The best revenge isn't just living well to show them what they lost. I've learned that still giving them too much power, making them the audience for your life. The best revenge is living well because you finally truly realize what you have found, your own unshakable strength, your own intrinsic value, and a beautiful, peaceful future that belongs to you and you alone. Thank you for listening to this story. It's a reminder that sometimes the most important and safest investment you can ever make is in yourself. If you have a story of your own or thoughts on this one, I'd be grateful to read them in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories.